G'day and welcome to this Silly Point podcast, all about the IPL or the non-IPL. That's what we go. And I'm joined this week by Declan Hooper from wikitopickets.com. My name is Phil Dillon. Declan, it's just been a strange few days, and the discussion has gone way beyond cricket now.
Well, I mean, there's so many layers to unpack with this, isn't it? You're totally right when you said it's gone totally past cricket now. It's going into geopolitics and all the rest of it. Personally, it's hard to say where I stand on the IPL. Obviously, I think it's a good thing now that the bubble has been burst, so to speak. You've got players, teams, officials who have contracted COVID. I mean, the only sensible thing to do was to stop it, I believe. I mean, it's especially in the current state of India. And I just wanted to say before we start, obviously, cricket is the most important of the non-important things, especially in India. And in a time like this, cricket doesn't really matter. However, it brings joy to billions of people in India. But in saying that, I think it's hard to say, really. I think looking back on it, hindsight, I think the idea of the bubble and listening to interviews with Glenn Maxwell and Pat Cummins and a few other people, the bubble sounded pretty airtight. I mean, they had staying in hotels. The hotel staff were staying in the hotels as well. It sounded like it was pretty airtight. And we've seen in the past, like the NBA had a bubble where they played it in Disneyland. We've seen other sports. I mean, we've seen the Premier League play all the way through COVID. We've seen plenty of other sports do the bubble to varying degrees of success. So, I mean, the bubble idea I don't think was the worst idea. However, it seemed like the moving around, especially in the state that India is in the moment, seemed to be the detriment.
It never really sat right with me right from the start. Before it even started, I thought, how can they go to India while all these people are outside are dying and not being able to get into hospitals and these guys are getting paid millions and millions of dollars. And I can understand why they wanted to keep it going, because they say that the cricket is like almost like an aside for these people, if that's the right word, for these people who are looking for something to think about other than COVID, because you can't imagine what it's like to be in India at the moment. There are 382,691 cases yesterday. For those people, I can understand why they wanted to give them something to cheer them up, for want of a better saying, but I can also see that everybody else's thing. Why are we watching cricket while our people, thousands of people are dying every day? 30,000 Indians have passed away since the IPL started. I
mean, that's a crazy statistic in itself.
It is an absolute crazy statistic, and it's only been going for like 4 or 5 weeks.
I do take the point on board about the giving people entertainment during, being locked inside and stuff like that. No, I mean, I was in the UK during the second wave of COVID over there, and I can say from my experience, I mean, the Premier League definitely did help people's morale and help people look forward to something. And I'm sure the same happened in Melbourne with the AFL coming back and all that kind of thing. So I can see that point, but when it starts affecting player safety, staff safety, taking up hospital beds, then it's a no-brainer for it to stop. So me personally, I don't think I have a problem with it starting. I mean, there's clearly some logistical errors because staff and players got COVID.
Well, it's a no-brainer now that Mr. Cricket's got COVID. Mike Hussey, we can't allow that to happen. I mean, trying to be a little bit trying to inject a little bit of humour in there, but I know it might not be the right thing to do. But like when it affects people that it's people can relate to, and I'm not just being disrespectful to to the Indians who've got COVID or anybody else that got COVID. When people relate to somebody like Mike Hussey, they realise that anybody can get it. It's not this disease is not it doesn't pick and choose, look, people say they had the choice to come back. Adam Zampa, AJ Ty, and Kane Richardson made the decision a couple of weeks ago to make the journey back themselves. And people say that these guys get paid millions and millions of dollars, so that they in these circumstances they could have had the choice not to go before. And I know they were told that these bubbles were going to be good, and everybody else, they had bubbles before, like you said, that had worked. But then we also had the problem with in South Africa with England cricket tour being cancelled, and Australians not going to South Africa for their tour.
That's exactly right, and I think there has to be a lot of blame put on the administrators of cricket, whether it be the BCCI or CA. I thought it was really interesting. I know Chris Lynn got slated, and some of his comments were a bit off. However, I thought it was really interesting to find out that CA take 10% of all the Australian players' salaries from the IPL. Now, I'm not sure. I'm not an economist or anything like that, but I dare say with some of the salaries that the Australian players are on in the IPL, that would account for a lot more than what they would have been due to make in South Africa.
Michael Slater, for example, said it wasn't about money. This is the tweet from Michael Slater on May the 3rd, which, if our government cared for the safety of Aussies, they would allow us to get home. It's a disgrace. Blood on your hands, PM. How dare you treat us like this? How about you sort out quarantine system? I had government permission to work on the IPL, but I now have government neglect. And then he also put another tweet up. And for those who think this is a money exercise, well, forget it. This is what I do for a living, and I've not made a penny having left early. So please stop the abuse and think of the thousands that are dying in India each day. It's called empathy. If only our government had some. Now, I think he misread the room, so to speak, because he's been absolutely slammed by majority of people across Australia.
It's amazing a tweet that's calling for empathy that lacks so much of that. I think the bit about Indians dying on the street really is a bit of a doesn't sit right with me, really.
Well, I think he's just trying to say that he's trying to make it out that it's not about him, it's about the Indians, and it's clearly about him. It's clearly about what he wants and what he thinks the Australian government should do for him. But what people are saying, I've read hundreds of comments on Facebook alone saying that he made the choice to go. Nobody forced him to go and to do his commentating stint in the IPL. He could have made the decision to not go. He could have made the decision to come back when it appeared to be going off badly. But he didn't. And the final thing is that he's also been slated because he's now isolating, for want of a better word, in the Maldives. I mean, which is I can't think of a better place to be for 14 days. There's 9,000 other Australians who have been waiting for ages to be flown home. 9,000.
This is the thing, and that's what's really riled people up, or a lot of people that I know that I've spoken to up the wrong way, is the fact that there is 9,000 Australians that are stranded in India. And look, from a human perspective, not so much Michael Slater, but I do feel for the cricketers because they're in limbo. They don't know necessarily when they're getting home or how they're getting home or anything like that, which is, obviously not a nice place to be in. But one, they've got a lot more financial means to get home due to their status. Plus, they've probably got a lot more influence to get home. I do think that's what's really hit a lot of people the wrong way.
No, look, I can understand his frustration. Of course, I can. It's and he's probably missing, and he's away from his family as well, which I can also understand. But just think of those other 9,000 people, and don't forget, this is like other Australians are all around the world stuck in places that they don't want to be because they want to be with their families. So it's not just India.
Doing a bit of reading around, the Kiwi cricketers all got vaccinated before they left by the government, which, rubbed a few people up the wrong way with the likes of the healthcare workers and quarantine workers waiting for vaccines. Now, I think they're going to have a lot less troubles with people coming back if, for these instances, these cricketers have been vaccinated before they left. They still have to do their hotel quarantine. It seems to be a lot tighter. The English cricketers, they have to do their, I think it's 10 days in the UK before they get back. South Africa, the same. So, I think looking at both sides of the coin, I can see where they're coming from. I just this is probably a wider thing, but the 9,000 that are stranded in India are not in the same boat to me as these cricketers.
Yeah.
To a certain extent they are, but they need to, these might be some of the most vulnerable people in society, and they are Australians. And I think the Australian government probably needs to, think about that before shutting borders.
From a purely cricket point of view, though, with these guys, I think the one thing that sits badly with it is the fact that these guys they're getting paid, ridiculous amounts of money for playing the game, and they've been on contracts for a lot of them been on contracts for the last 3 or 4 years. So it's not just their first year of getting $1 million contracts. They're already millionaires.
No, and but I can't begrudge any of these players.
Absolutely not.
For playing the IPL, like you likes of Ben Cutting, friend of the show. Mm-hmm. That's his career, isn't it? He's an IPL. Oh, he's a T20 player. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that's his biggest payday of the year is going to the IPL.
Course. Absolutely.
If you look at the statistics from India and the COVID statistics, it's almost as soon as the IPL started, it seemed like it was it wasn't like a gradual spike; it was a straight up kind of spike. So again, I think it's easy for us to look hindsight wise and say it shouldn't have happened, and it probably shouldn't have, and these cricketers shouldn't have gone. However, in the time, the situation wasn't what it is now.
So the question we have to ask now, and what we should be more specifically talking about, I suppose, is what happened next, and what goes on down the line, looking ahead to the T20 World Cup, which in November is supposed to be taking place in India.
This kind of throws the whole schedule into a bit of disarray. You've got New Zealand players in the IPL flying to England for the English summer. You've got English players the same. You've got India meant to be touring England in the summer, or the English summer.
Yeah.
It throws the whole schedule
The
into
World
disarray.
Championship final between New Zealand and India. So there's, does it mean then? Would it mean necessarily that those players in the IPL don't get chosen? Well, I don't even know when those games are on.
So, according to Glenn Maxwell, apparently there is chartered flights from the ECB for the English and Indian and New Zealand players to go to England.
Right.
So Glenn Maxwell, he said he was considering going to England, but without coming back to Australia because he's playing in the 100 this year.
Yeah, okay.
So, I mean, there's that. I think that, again, like them getting out of India, I do think CA have really put their head in the sand on this one, considering they are taking 10% of the salaries of these Australian cricketers. I mean, they're happy to take the salary, but then, you know, when this goes wrong, I think the BCCI,
well done.
yeah, are the same. Like they're running this competition, and I mean their administration thus far has been very questionable.
So really, it should be CA that are being questioned about how you're going to get these guys home, rather than the Australian government. I think in this instance, but then the Australian government is saying, well, we're not letting them back in until after May the 15th, when we're going to relook at that.
See, I think CA should be flying these guys to, you know, whether it's Dubai, I think
Maldives. I think they're saying that now that the guy Nick Hockley, is it the CEO of Cricket Australia, said today that they're possibly going to fly them to the Maldives and go with Michael Slater. And if they can stay, if they can stay there for 2 weeks, then while that 2 weeks, then that's good. Gives the government a chance to have a look at the situation again, and look, nobody's going to get thrown into jail. And we wouldn't see Pat Cummins or any of those guys get thrown into jail, I'm sure.
I do actually have to say, just a quick word on Pat Cummins while you mention him. I know he's donated quite a lot of his money to charity, and he looks like he's helped in whatever way he could, obviously being in the bubble and that kind of thing. And I think he showed quite a lot of leadership there and a bit of humility, in which the likes of Michael Slater can probably take note of. And look, I mean, a wider conversation again, but it probably does show his leadership qualities for the Australian captain's job somewhere down the line.
Yeah, good on Pat Cummins. I mean, it's like there's a few people quick to have a go and like the tall poppy syndrome and chop these guys down, and they've also got to you've got to look at it from their perspective and see what their frustrations are as well.
Yeah, and look, I think the biggest thing is, as you said, like, it's reading the room, isn't it? I mean, there's a clear, obvious way to go about things, and a clear, obvious way not to go about things, and you've just seen the juxtaposition there between Pat Cummins, who's been, a stand-up model professional throughout this whole difficult situation, and Michael Slater, who's been, for lack of a better word, a total wanker. So, yeah, I think there's that. Going back to the Cricket World Cup, the T20 World Cup, and this wider schedule in general. I had a quick look. CricBiz today put a story out saying that the IPL were looking to start up again in September. It's being muted. Now, I think that's somewhat wishful thinking.
In India,
this is what they're mooting. I think, we saw that the Dubai, or the UAE rather, IPL went off without too many hitches.
Yeah.
I think. Look, I from all I've read, it seems to be that the biggest problem, the way the bubble burst, so to speak, was the fact that they were moving to, Mumbai, Ahmedabad, etc.
Yeah, and
I
then
think
one of the players went out for a shoulder scan or something like that, and apparently came back with, tested positive for COVID, and that was where it all started. But obviously that's going to just snowball.
Exactly right. Especially when they're in a enclosed environment as they are. I think, like, looking at it, I think the NBA kind of showed how they did the bubble right. I mean, they had it at Disneyland, if I'm not mistaken, and they had it for a couple of months.
Yeah, more than that.
It was ages. So I think if it was to go ahead, I'm not sure if I mean, it doesn't sit right with me right now. No. I mean, you'd have to reassess the situation in weeks, months' time. But I think that they'd have to learn from their mistakes here and, tighten the bubble, not move around as much, and make sure, because we talk about the players that have caught COVID, but there's also, I'm sure there's plenty of support staff which are, not as young as these players and probably not as fit as these players that are probably a lot more at risk of, being seriously ill with COVID. And that has to be a major consideration as well. It's not just the players.
Yeah. Don't forget, if you're going to, when you have the T20 World Cup, you're going to have, so each squad is probably like a squad of 16 maybe. So there's like 8 teams, 8 16s. I don't know what, my maths isn't that good. Plus all the support staff, and there's it's like an entourage of, I don't know, 20. There's blokes who carry the kit. You name it, they're there. And like you say, they're not going to be. They're going to be 50s and 60s. Some of them. They're going to be more at risk. And so, do they start planning now for an IPL? A T20 World Cup somewhere else?
I think they should as well. I think if you're the BCCI, you're
struggling with that. You're struggling with that big time, aren't you?
Yeah, no, yeah. Too many letters. CA, it's much easier.
Yeah, it's much easier.
Then I think they probably see the return of the IPL as a bit of a crash run to the T20 World Cup.
Yeah.
However, I think I mean, it's how many? It's May now. It doesn't give much time if they were to move it for it to go somewhere else. I mean, ideally, I think
what places where in the world would be safe in inverted commas for Australia, obviously, New Zealand, obviously, United Arab Emirates again, the UAE, and I don't know. England is now, they've got crowds back at. They had crowds at the snooker World Championships the other day, a full house. So and 50 million people in Britain have had the COVID jab. So they're getting back at, supposedly getting back on their feet.
As it stands currently, we're meant to be having a T20 World Cup this year, and then a T20 World Cup next year.
In Australia.
So, I mean, either you amalgamate the two and have one,
or you
swap them over.
Or you swap them over, yeah.
I mean, Australia's meant to have the World Cup end of last year, as it was anyway. I mean, and look, Australia's not perfect when it comes to COVID, and you're talking about these poor people stuck in India, exhausting, this Australia's quarantine, hotel quarantine system. I mean, that's one thing, and then trying to get cricket administrators and cricketers and their support staff from 10 nations or however many countries are competing in the T20 World Cup is a big logistical ask, especially. I mean, we saw what happened with the Australian Open and the mixed success of that. Put it that way. So I mean, whoever does decide to, whoever it goes to, they've got a job on their hands regardless. So, I mean, I don't know. Thinking about it now, I don't know whether you hold off the World Cup till next year, and if that's in India, so be it, or if that's in Australia. Also gives time. I mean, like the likes of Australia have barely played any cricket this year because of the obstructions of COVID and all that kind of thing. So you could have players that are, you know, underdone and the rest. So, I mean,
well, I think it's time for the like all the you know the cricket the bigwigs around the world to get together and say, what are we going to do? We need to sort this out sooner rather than later, because otherwise it's gonna be chaos. Don't forget we got the Ashes in November. It's like you can't have it like everything being, you know, all together. You've got to get people flying everywhere as well. You've got to have obviously the isolation before anything starts.
well, look, I mean, I think all the steps will be taken for the, like, I can't see India not touring England this year. I mean, even as bad as it is in India, I think currently they'll do the quarantine. You know, they'll do the whatever they need to make that happen. I mean, we saw Pakistan last year. There was a number of players that caught COVID just before they were due to tour England, and I mean, it threw a spanner in the works, but they still managed to get, you know, 3 Test matches and some T20s played. So I have no doubt that the Indian team will be playing. However, I think for the very near future, it just doesn't seem right to have, you know, cricket being played there. As sad as that is for the people.
Exactly. I can understand. I can understand if these tours don't go ahead, then it's going to cost the boards a lot of money, and they'll have to find another way of making that money up.
I think if you ask South Africa, they're probably, I mean, the COVID crisis has already hit everyone. You know, no one's really been unscathed by that. And I think if you ask, the precedent that's been set by the English and Australian boards to not tour, well, to, you know, cancel tours and then not tour South Africa. I mean, these well, for lack of a better word, lesser nations, they'll be feeling the pitch, and look, and I mean, and it'll be the case where it'll be the have-not. I mean, it already is in cricket, the haves and have-nots, and that gap will get wider and wider, because I mean, Australia's played India, England's played India home and away, and then they're coming out to play the Ashes.
You can understand why South Africa was so upset about that decision by
100%,
by Australia
100%.
Because, you know, they would have asked the situation when India went to Australia and played that series. Why can't Australia come to South Africa?
And
they're treating us like a you know, an also ran, you know, and they shouldn't be treated like that. That was interesting about what Chris Lynn said. I bet nobody knew that before what Chris Lynn said came out, and that sort of like, because Cricket Australia could have said, well, look, they're on contracts with their IPL franchises, it's got nothing to do with us. But now Chris Lynn has spilled the beans and said that they do have
they're culpable. Yeah.
They are culpable. They've got to be accountable.
And not to mention, I think Scott Morrison, this was maybe a week or two ago, said that they wouldn't be receiving any special treatment because it's a private enterprise and they weren't representing Australia. And I mean, you can say in a in a kind of secondary way, they are representing Australia because the Australian Cricket Board's making money from them. And I mean, Chris Lynn, I think he's, put it this way, I think he's got less to lose by speaking out against CA than someone like Jai Richardson.
Yeah.
Or
David Warner. Or...
Yeah, exactly right.
You know,
because, I mean, I dare say his international career is probably more or less over.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And if David Warner came out and had a go at Cricket Australia for the way you're not picking them up, or like Jai Richardson, who could be set for a international career down the line, if they said something, then they could be taken off. Warner could lose his contract for sure.
And I'm actually just thinking of that, and you make a good point there. And using Jai Richardson as an example, I do think it'd be interesting to know the amount of Australian cricketers that were wanting to leave earlier, but probably felt some kind of, well, I wouldn't say loyalty to their teams, but the fact that, if they'd looked bad, like if they'd left earlier, would that affect them in auctions next year, the year after? It'd be interesting to know if that was, part of their thought process of staying, was that, obviously they didn't want to alienate themselves for future IPLs either.
Yeah. Like obviously these younger guys, excuse me, have got, years ahead of them, you'd hope. Whereas, like you say, the likes of Ben Cutting and the older players who are only really like T20 guns for hire. That's all they've got left.
Look, hopefully there's a solution for the Australian players, and they get home safely, as well as the 9,000 that are stranded home.
We want every Australian home safe and sound. Let's make that point clear. We're not saying leave those guys out there because they only went for the money, etc., etc. That's not what we're saying. We just we got to have a little bit of perspective on this and say, okay, a lot of people would be happy to be sat in the Maldives waiting to come home to Australia just for a couple of weeks, and then they can all come home safely. Safely is the ultimate word, and everybody is safe, not just them, but the people in Australia here who are waiting for, might get something if they come back with COVID and they spread it through
100%. And look, I think, I mean, we have to preface this and end this by saying again that, our heart goes out to anyone that's been affected by that in India. I know we've got a lot of Indian viewers, so we hope that everyone, times get better and everyone's as safe as they can be through this crisis, and hopefully, in a couple of months we can talk about, just about cricket rather than politics and everything else that comes along with it. Thanks for your time, Phil, and I'll chat to you again soon, mate.